Good day. My name is Adele Holtzapfel. I'm a consultant at About IT. Today we are going to look at the purchase and reconciling of fixed assets in Acumatica Cloud ERP. The fixed asset lifecycle is very crucial. It allows you to manage your valuable items effectively and add more useful life of assets to your organization. In today's training video, we are going to look at the purchase of an asset and how to convert the purchase to fixed assets. Before we do that, let's look at the different statuses of fixed assets. On hold, the asset is saved and may still be edited but cannot depreciate. Active, the asset can be depreciated and disposed of. Fully depreciated, the asset's cost was fully depreciated over the useful life of the asset in all depreciation books assigned to the asset. Disposed, the asset has been disposed of. Suspended, the depreciation is temporarily stopped from the asset. Reversed, the asset has been reversed. And then additional operations with fixed assets, you can split the asset, transfer, you can reverse the disposal, and you can also migrate. There are two ways to enter fixed assets. Manually entering a fixed asset. When you create manually, the system generates a purchase plus transaction. Later, after the needed transactions are processed in the system, you will have to reconcile the cost of the created asset with the appropriate GL entries. During the reconciliation, the system generates a reconciliation plus transaction. You can change any of these settings before you release the acquisition transaction. Convert the purchase to a fixed asset. This is the easiest way to enter a fixed asset. During the conversion, the system generates a purchasing plus transaction that records the asset acquisition and reconciliation plus transaction. That reconciles a converted amount and links the created asset to the appropriate purchase. Most of the settings for the conversion are copied by default from the fixed asset class that you have specified for the assets. You can only change some of the fixed asset settings before conversion. Then you release the transaction. So we're going to do a bill and adjustment to purchase assets, and then we will convert the purchase to assets. In my previous training video, we already set up the company and we've done all the configurations to use the fixed asset module. So we're only going to look at transactions in this training session. In Acumatica, we will go to payables, bills and adjustments. We're going to create a new bill. See, there's your vendor. We're going to select the vendor and the date. I'm just going a bit back so that we can do proper depreciation. And here we start just a short description what the purchase is about. The branches automatically, it's not an inventory ID. In the description, you can just type in what the purchase is about. Buy 3 of them. The account is very important. For the purpose of this conversion, I'm going to use the purchase accrual account. The purpose of that account is we'll keep the cost of the purchase, and then when you convert it to a fixed asset, we'll take it out of this purchase accrual account. And for the antivirus software, I'm going to use exactly the same account. I'm going to take it off hold and release. Now we're going to convert the purchase to fixed assets. To do that, you will go to your fixed assets, processes. You will find convert purchases to assets. But before we do that, I just want to show you the list of fixed assets. In the fixed asset profiles, you will find fixed assets. As you can see, there are no computers and no software. So now we're going to do that conversion, convert purchases to assets. This is the easiest way to create a fixed asset, is to convert a purchase to a fixed asset. Once a company has purchased any property that is supposed to be a fixed asset, you can direct the system to create the corresponding fixed asset with the appropriate settings. Now, let's work through the screen first. At the top left-hand side, there's my purchase accrual account. This is the account we used when we purchased the fixed assets. SIP account, if there's a SIP account, you will select the correct one. And then you have the show transaction marked as reconcile. If you select it, you can view the transactions marked as reconcile. On the top right-hand side, you have your branch. Custodian, the person who will be responsible for this new fixed asset. And then the department, remember fixed assets belongs to departments. In the upper table, the table displays the transactions from purchase receipts. If you select the transaction in this table, you can specify the conversion details in the lower table. Now, you will see there's some information about the purchase. You can see the department, the branch, the quantities, the price, the unit price, as well as the original transaction date, the module, the batch number, the reference number, as well as the vendor. So we're going to work with computers first. So you will select the unlabeled box, and then in the asset class, you will select computers. In the lower table, you will see there's 3 computers, so 3 different asset IDs will be created. If you don't want that to happen, you only want to have one asset ID for all 3 computers, then you can't use the conversion option. You have to do it manually. I'm going to use this method. I want for each computer its own asset ID. You can make some changes on the lower table. You can change your branch, the department, the receipt date, the placing service date, and also transaction amount, as well as your description. I'm happy with this, so we're going to say process. We still have to do the software as well, so exactly the same. Once again, remember, if you have 4 or 5 of these items, make sure that you select them. It's going to create 5 different asset IDs. And then we convert the purchase to fixed assets. So let's go and look at our fixed assets. Under your profile, you will find fixed assets. And there you will see there's your 3 computers and your 5 antivirus assets. Let's go through the screen. From the top, you will see actions. From this screen, you can suspend the fixed assets. You can dispose. You can do reverse disposal, reverse, calculate depreciation, and split. From the top first, asset ID generated automatically, and your description. There's also a place for parent asset. The parent asset of this asset, you can use this box to set up the relationship among assets. Then under your general settings, the general settings tab is used to specify asset summary and tracking details. You will see there's your asset class. We set up the asset class in the previous training session, but I will go, if you click on the pencil, you will see there's your asset class description. Under your general settings, you link it to the asset type, specify if it's tangible and depreciate, the useful life. Under the depreciation settings, you will see the books that's allocated to this asset class, as well as the depreciation method, as well and the useful life. You will also see the general ledger accounts tab will show you all the general ledger accounts that have been set up for this specific fixed asset class. Property type, the way the asset was acquired. You can see there's property, there's a list of different options that you have there. Status, by default, the status is active when you convert the purchase to a fixed asset. Then we have your asset type, your tangible box, the quantity. Even if the invoice said 3, remember when you use the conversion method, it will generate 3 different asset IDs. As I mentioned before, if you don't want 3 separate asset IDs, you have to come to this form and then you can put in your three quantity here, but then it will only create one asset ID. Depreciate, there's your useful life, receipt date, you can change your place and service date, it's not always going to be the same. There's your original acquisition cost. There's also a place for salvage amount, the book value at the end of the useful life of the asset you can put in. You can also put in replacement cost. That will, if you need to replace this computer with exactly the same computer. Disposable date and method and amount will only be available as soon as you dispose of this asset. In the right-hand side, you've got your tracking info. There's your branch. It can be a building identifier. So if you want to add a building, you click on the pencil, click on the plus sign, and let's say this is going to be the head office. Save. And then you can select your building. You can put a floor number 5, for example, and room 501. The custodian will be the person who's going to be responsible for this asset. Department, remember fixed assets belongs to departments. The reason, this reason will be when you transfer this asset, you will give a reason. And then there's also a field for your tag number. On your next tab, receipt type, this is your purchase details. There's a receipt date, a receipt type, receipt number. If you work with purchase orders, you can put in the purchase order number here. By default, the build number will pull in because we work with a convert to fixed assets. If you don't use the convert to fixed assets, you have to type it in manually. There's a place for manufacturer, module, serial number, as well as warranty expire on. In the right-hand side, you've got your tangible info section, and you have personal property types. There's conditions. You can select conditions, fair market value. And also you have, if this was a building or you have to lease something or rent, you can put in the information about lease and rent on this side. The general ledger accounts tab. You use the general ledger accounts tab to define the accounts and sub-accounts to which the system will post accumulated depreciation, fixed asset cost, proceeds from asset disposal, depreciation expenses. If an asset is assigned to a particular fixed asset class by default, this tab displays the accounts and sub-accounts to the fixed asset class. However, you can select other accounts and sub-accounts for the fixed asset. So there's just all the setups, what we have done. This automatically pull through from the asset class. By default, you will see you can't change your fixed asset account and your fixed asset accrual account because we convert the purchase to a fixed asset. If you didn't convert the purchase to a fixed asset and done it manually, you can still change these accounts. The next tab is your balance tab. You use this tab to assign the asset to depreciation books and to view and edit the information related to the balance of the asset. Then you can see all the different columns. There's your book. This book we set up and we link it to the asset class. This is your depreciation method, which is your straight line. Tells me the status is still active. Posting book. This indicates that this book will post to the general ledger. There's your depreciation from date and period, the last depreciation period and date. There's your original acquisition cost. And there's a lot of columns here. You can see business use, there's a basis, your salvage amount, accumulated depreciation, your net value, your gain and loss account, percentage per year, useful life, additional life years, averaging cost convention, your mid-period type. Most of this information comes from your asset class. Your next tab will be the components tab. This tab displays a list of fixed assets for which the current asset is the parent asset. For example, a component of this asset can be the repair or improvement of it. You cannot modify any information displayed on this tab. As you can see on these columns, it's just once again your asset ID, description, class, your type, status, the cost, the useful life, active, your property type, condition, and then of course your receipt information. The next tab is your depreciation history tab. You can use the depreciation history tab to view the calculated depreciation according to the depreciation books to which the asset was assigned. This tab appears as soon as the settings of the fixed asset module are specified on the fixed asset preferences form. The way the data is displayed on this tab depends on the depreciation history view option specified on the fixed asset preferences form. You can set up the form to view depreciation records in a selected book or in all books at once, side by side. Now, when we set up the company, we decide we're going to work with by book. So at the top here, you will see this book, and that's the only book that you will be able to see. If you select it side by side, this tab displays side by side all the books to which the asset has been assigned. You may not edit the information. So you will have a lot of columns here with the different book names to view all the books. Location history, it's very straightforward. The tab displays any modifications that were made to the tracking info section on the general ledger tab. So if I go back to my general ledger tab, this is the information that will appear under your location history tab. That is this tab display where the asset was located, which department the asset belonged to, and who was the custodian of the asset before modifications were made. You cannot edit or delete the information displayed on this tab. The most recent modification is displayed at the top of the modifications list. Next, we have our transaction history tab. On this tab, you can view all the asset-related transactions that were generated by the system or entered manually. You can manually create transactions of this purchasing plus or depreciation plus type by using the fixed asset transaction form. You can delete a transaction listed here only if it has not been released. Now you can see by default, the transaction is purchase plus and the reconciliation plus. Why? Because we convert the purchase to fixed assets, so we don't have to do anything to reconcile it manually. When I move to the right-hand side, you will see there's your reference number. If I click on the reference number, it will open the fixed asset transaction form, and you can see what happened with your transaction. It's your assets, ID, your description, the book that have been used, your transaction types, debit accounts, and of course your SIP accounts. And this side you will find your credit accounts and in the amounts, as well as your transaction period. And you can see the status posted. The batch number, if I click on that one, it will give you your journal transaction. Once again, the branch, the account, description, SIP account, the reference number, the date, and your debit and credit amounts. The last tab, of course, is your reconciliation tab. From the top, it gives you your asset ID, your description. You can see, you can also do your additions and your deductions from this tab. Your account, we worked with a purchase accrued account, SIP account, the transaction date, and then you will see what was your original cost, the current cost, the accrued, and it's automatically been reconciled. Once again, why did it automatically reconcile? Because we convert the purchase to a fixed asset. So you don't have to do anything manually. If you added manually a fixed asset, it will you have to select at the bottom here, and then you have to process to do the reconciliation. That is why the convert purchase to a fixed asset is the easiest way. We don't have to do extra manual processes. So we covered how to purchase an asset, and then we convert the asset to a fixed asset. So let's go and look at a few reports. Under your fixed assets, inquiries, there's your asset summary report. This will give you a list of all the assets existing in your system. There they are. You can search according to an asset class or an asset type. There's also a place for property type, your custodian, place and service type. You can search per branch, building, floor, apartment. There's also PO number, receipt or bill number. So the information that you will see here is your asset ID, description, your asset class, asset type, the useful life, place in service, the original cost, as well as property and the condition. The next one we're going to look at is our asset transaction history. You can, here you get a detailed view of the transaction history of a specific asset for the selected account within a specified range of periods. So here you have to select a specific asset. So let's work with our computer. I need to change my period because I work with backdated. And there you can see there's your Dell computer. You can see what is happening with this transaction, when it's debited, when it's credited, and the date as well. And you can see the transaction types. You can also see the book. Next one, we're going to look at the fixed asset balance report. This report lists fixed assets and show the status of the asset balance, the useful life, the depreciation method, the last depreciation period the business used, the acquisition cost, the basis account, the accumulated depreciation, and the net value. You can, once again, there's your company branch, your book, that's your posting book. Your class, you can select a class. Let's go for computers because I know there's a few. And we say run. And there you will see it's a typical fixed asset balance report. You have your asset ID, the book, the class, there's a status. You can see your useful life, your depreciation method, the cost, and then the net value. Currently, we didn't do any depreciation. We're going to cover depreciation in the future in a training video. If you click on one of these fields, the link, it will take you automatically to the fixed asset form. Next, we're going to look at the fixed asset net value. This report displays information about the net value of the fixed asset assigned to a particular book for a specific financial period. You can also filter here. You can decide which branch, which book you want to view. I'm just going to change my period here as well. You can also specify a specific class. I'm not going to specify class. We're going to look at all the assets. You can see it's going to split your report. At the top, it's buildings, for example. There is computers, your land, your software. And you can see if there was any additions, disposal proceeds, depreciation, end of depreciation, of course, and then your end net value. The second last report I want to look at will be your fixed asset list report. This report lists summary information about your fixed assets. I'm just going to change my date here. Once again, you can select class. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say run report. And this is just a straightforward list. It gives you your asset ID, your description, your class, the asset type, and if it's tangible or not. It'll show receipt date, the branch, the department, and the status. The last report I want to look at is your acquisitions report. This report displays details of the fixed assets acquisitions for the specified financial periods. The information can be filtered also by book. We have a book by period. You can once again select the class, the department, or the custodian. And there you can see it's once again your asset ID, description, document number, document date, debit account, your SIP account, your credit account, as well as your cost. So this is a short training video, but we only want to concentrate on one part of the fixed asset transactions. So we looked at how to create the bill as well as how to convert the purchase to the fixed asset. As I mentioned before, this is the easiest way. You don't have to do any extra manual transactions when you do this.